Okay, so Andrew Forrest. Tweaking, right. We're going deep on this guy, and honestly, the deeper you go, the more interesting it gets. Outback kid, mining magnate, but, well, there's a lot more to unpack.
He's a complicated figure, that's for sure. Just going through these Wikipedia excerpts, you get this fascinating picture. Entrepreneurial, clearly driven, throws himself into philanthropy, but then you've got some serious criticisms leveled against him, too.
And the family history.
Yeah.
Generations tied to Minderoo Station. We're talking massive property in the Pilbara.
Yeah.
That's some serious roots right there.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's not just the land. Politicians in the family tree, his great-great-uncles were like big deals in early Western Australia.
It's crucial to remember that context. We're not talking about some, overnight success story here. There's a deep, deep connection to Western Australia. Generations of it, all the opportunity that represents, but the complexities too, right? It adds a whole other layer to his early ventures.
And one of those early ventures nearly ruined him, didn't it? Anaconda Nickel, that was, what, early 2000s? Basically crashed and burned.
Yeah, that near collapse with Anaconda, it's almost like a microcosm of how Forrest operates. He's willing to take huge risks, even if it means potentially losing everything. It makes you wonder if that experience, as tough as it was, if it fueled the even bigger gamble that became Fortescue Metals.
Yeah, and go big, he did.
Yeah.
That first iron ore shipment to China in 2008, that was Fortescue announcing itself to the world.
A defining moment, no doubt. And it's a big but. This success story, it's got a shadow side. For years, Fortescue was pulling billions of dollars worth of ore from Yunji-Barndi land without their permission. We're talking $50 billion worth before any legal challenges were even mounted.
Wait, 50 billion,
Yeah.
I mean, that's more than some countries' entire economies. It's hard to even comprehend that kind of money.
It's a staggering figure, and it really highlights the sheer scale of what Forrest was able to achieve with Fortescue. But it also forces us to ask some difficult ethical questions. How do you square that level of wealth generation with the rights of the indigenous communities who were directly impacted? That's a question that follows Andrew Forrest, and it's something we need to keep in mind as we go further into this story. And then there's the whole mining tax saga. Do you remember that?
Oh, how could I forget? Economic vandalism, was it? Mad Dog's breakfast. Talk about fighting words from a billionaire. You don't see that every day.
It was a real statement. He
Really?
was willing to step into the political arena, especially when he felt like his interests were being threatened. Whether you agree with his stance or not, it was a bold move. And it wasn't just about protecting his own fortune, well, maybe a little, but he framed it as a fight for the whole industry, for the future of Australian mining. It's that kind of audacity that makes him so fascinating.
And speaking of audacity, his company, Tatarang, what a mix of ventures. You've got the mining, obviously, but then energy, agriculture, even the Cooper hats.
It's an eclectic portfolio, to say the least.
That's one way to put it.
But I think it speaks to his ambition. This isn't just about making money for Forrest. It's about influence, shaping things. It's like he wants to leave his mark on a whole range of Australian industries, on Australian culture even, in a way that goes beyond just digging up resources.
And then you've got global rapid rugby. Now that one still has me scratching my head. What was he thinking with that venture?
Right. I mean, even for someone like Andrew Forrest, it seemed like a curveball, this fast-paced, experimental rugby league. He poured millions into it, and it ultimately, well, it folded.
It did.
But you have to admire the sheer audacity of it. He
Yeah.
had this vision, this passion, and he went for it full throttle, even though it meant potentially falling flat on his face. And that's a rare thing, especially in the billionaire class.
But then there's Forrest's philanthropy, which is on a whole other scale. We're talking one of the first Aussie billionaires to pledge most of their wealth to good causes while they're still alive. That's practically unheard of.
It's an incredible commitment. The kind of money we're talking about, it has the potential to be transformative. But, and this is something you see a lot with Forrest, there's often more to the story.
Okay, I'm getting a but here.
Well, the scale of his giving, it's undeniably impressive, right? But there have been some pretty pointed criticisms, especially when it comes to his approach to Indigenous philanthropy.
Like what specifically? What kind of criticisms are we talking about?
There have been accusations of land deals that haven't exactly been above board, and concerns that some of the programs, particularly ones meant to help train Indigenous workers, that they haven't really delivered on their promises. It raises this important point, about going beyond just the dollar figure attached to a donation. It's about transparency, accountability, making sure the people you're supposedly helping are actually benefiting.
And then there was that comment he made. about indigenous women and cigarettes. That did not go over well.
Yeah, the sex for cigarettes comment created a real firestorm, sparked a human rights complaint, didn't it? It brought all these questions back up about whether Forrest really understands the complexities of the issues facing indigenous communities.
It's hard to reconcile that with
It's
something like the
great.
Global Slavery Index, right?
Yeah.
That's a massive global effort to map out and hopefully combat modern slavery.
Hugely ambitious. And the index, it uses data in a really interesting way to try to expose the extent of modern slavery, something that operates in the shadows for the most part. It's gotten a lot of international attention, and I think it has spurred some action for sure. But it also raises the question, what's the motivation behind it?
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Is there an element of like reputation management going on? Is this in part Forrest positioning himself as, the global leader on this morally unambiguous issue, maybe to offset some of the controversies that have dogged his business practices over the years? Or is it purely driven by a genuine desire to make the world a better place? It's tough to say, and honestly, it's probably a bit of both. That's the thing about Andrew Forrest. He defies easy categorization.
It seems like it.
Yeah.
So where does that leave us? How do we reconcile these seemingly contradictory aspects of his story?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We've seen his ambition, the successes, undeniable, the philanthropy on a scale that's hard to ignore, and yet the controversies, they're always there. What's clear is that Andrew Forrest is a force to be reckoned with. He will leave his mark on the world. Whether that mark is ultimately judged as positive or negative, well, that's a question for the historians, I suppose. But it's a question worth asking, and it's a question that each of us has to answer for ourselves as we watch how the rest of his story unfolds.
It's a story that's still being written. And as we've seen, it's a story full of twists, turns, and surprises. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the enigmatic world of Andrew Forrest. It's a story that's as captivating as it is complex. Until next time, keep digging deeper.